I am against the shepherds, and I will rescue my sheep from their mouths. Welcome back to Why Hope, the video series that explores reasons for hope in our day. This is Season 6, Episode 2. In Season 6, we're looking at the life and teachings of Jesus. Last week, we began by thinking about Jesus as the Good Shepherd who heals and binds up his sheep and seeks the lost. We're going to continue with the theme of the Good Shepherd this week, but we're going to think about the angry Good Shepherd. Now, we're going to begin by coming back to where we started last week, which was Ezekiel 34. Let me read some of the same words, and then I'm going to read some different parts from the same chapter. So, remembering that the context is God's covenant people in the Old Testament have been disobedient to the covenant, have been scattered among the nations. Ezekiel is a prophet raised up to speak to those scattered peoples. And he has these harsh words to speak about their leaders, their religious leaders, who have basically got them into so much trouble. So Ezekiel 34. The word of the Lord came to me. Mortal, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, to the shepherds, thus says the Lord God, you shepherds of Israel who have been feeding yourselves. Should not shepherds feed the sheep? You eat the fat, you clothe yourselves with the wool, you slaughter the fatlings, but you do not feed the sheep. You have not strengthened the weak. You have not healed the sick. You have not bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strayed. You have not sought the lost, but with force and harshness you have ruled them. So they were scattered, because there was no shepherd. And scattered they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep were scattered. Now, reading on to some of the parts we didn't read last week. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As I live, says the Lord God, because my sheep have become a prey, and my sheep have become food for all the wild animals. Since there was no shepherd, and because my shepherds have not searched for my sheep, but the shepherds have fed themselves, and have not fed my sheep. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God, I am against the shepherds, and I will demand my sheep at their hand, and put a stop to their feeding the sheep. For no longer shall the shepherds feed themselves. I will rescue my sheep from their mouths, so that they may not be food for them. These words of Ezekiel, Jesus understands, are foreshadowing his own role, and so he describes himself as the Good Shepherd. Let me read you a little portion from John 14 where Jesus is describing himself as the Good Shepherd. And then it sounds a bit like he's switched the metaphor, because he's going to talk about himself as the door. But I don't think he has switched the metaphor. We need to understand that a shepherd in those days would, at night time, would bring his sheep into a fold and would lie down at the entrance to that fold, so that no animal or person indeed could get in to steal or harm the sheep, except by stepping over him. So this is Jesus continuing the metaphor of him being the Good Shepherd. Listen to this. Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So in Ezekiel 34, what we get is God saying, I will be the shepherd of my people, since the leaders that I put in charge have done this so very badly. And part of the role of being a shepherd is to call to account the abusive shepherds and to protect and defend my sheep. So I want to show you a couple of instances from the life of Jesus where we see this taking place. And they're instances, interestingly, that people sometimes feel uncomfortable with. And I hope that if that's how you have felt when you've heard them in the past, that in 5 minutes' time you'll feel a bit differently about them. So we're going to start with Mark 13. And Mark 13 contains two what sounds like quite separate stories, but actually they're linked. Now the first story is split in half. And the second story, if you like, is slotted into the middle. So we're going to have half of the first story the second story, the second half of the first story. I hope that makes sense. Listen to how they link up. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see whether perhaps he would find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Then they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling and those who were buying in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching and saying, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." In the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. Then Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." Now, how are these two stories linked? Well, the fig tree or the vine, these are metaphors used in the Old Testament for God's people. And again, a number of places in the prophets, we have this metaphor where God describes his people as a tree or a vine from whom he expects fruitfulness. And the fruitfulness that he's looking for are faithfulness to him and compassion and love for one another. In a nutshell, could say a bit more about that, but that's for another time. So when Jesus walks up to this fig tree and looks for fruit on it, knowing full well it's not the season for figs, he's not hangry. He's not irritable because he's hungry. He's doing a performed prophecy. He's living out, he's kind of acting out, if you like, those Old Testament prophecies of God coming to look for fruitfulness from his people and failing to find it, and the people coming under judgment as a consequence. That's what the fig tree is demonstrating. And in the middle of that, we have the temple, the cleansing of the temple, a very well-known story, and again, sometimes misunderstood. People think that Jesus just flipped, he lost his temper, he had a moment of madness, as it were. And none of those things are true. It's very clear in the Gospels that Jesus has already checked out the temple the previous day. If he was going to flip, if he was going to lose his cool, that would be the moment when it happened. This is a very deliberate action, just like the judgment on the fig tree was a deliberate action. So his flipping of the tables in the temple is a deliberate action. It's a demonstration of God's judgment against the religious authorities which were abusing the people and causing them harm and getting in the way of their worship. They were bad shepherds, just like Ezekiel 34 speaks about. And Jesus, the good shepherd, is coming to set things right for his sheep. One more place where we see some glimpses of this. Another place where Jesus gets very angry. And we read this in Matthew 23. And this is also set within Holy Week, in the last week of Jesus' life. So may have taken place very close to the cleansing of the temple. When it's not quite clear, the chronology of that week is a little bit unclear. But Jesus has a long sermon against the religious leaders. He describes them as, well, they were scribes and Pharisees in that day. Let's listen to this in the context, perhaps, of some abusive religious leaders of our own time. "So do not do as they do," says Jesus, "because they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear. They lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others. They love to have the place of honour at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues. But woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites! You lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. Woe to you! You cross sea and land to make a single convert, and then you make the new convert twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you! You tithe the herbs in your garden, but you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. Woe to you! You clean the outside of the cup and the plate," that's kind of religious observance, "but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you! You hypocrites, you're like whitewashed tombs, look beautiful on the outside, but inside you're full of the bones of the dead and all kinds of filth. Woe to you, you brood of vipers, you snakes." Strong words, For this is the passion, this is the good shepherd, furious with the bad shepherds. This is the good shepherd who defends his sheep. This is the good shepherd who lies down at the door of his sheepfold and says, you're going to have to come to my sheep through me. And for this reason, we can have hope.